Business leaders know that their data is the key to unlocking the power of AI, but they don't know where to start because their data is everywhere and the use cases are vast. In this video, I'm going to cover best practices for defining a CDP scope. I'm Tim Smith. I work for Microsoft as a global black belt, and I guide our customers on their journeys to transform with AI. As I mentioned before this series kicked off, CDP projects are very difficult because data is everywhere and the use cases are vast. This speaks specifically to that last part. Use cases are vast. I mentioned in prior videos, the use cases are expanding beyond marketing, sales, and service. And so this is a framework to help you define how to break these projects down and get to value as soon as possible. Omnichannel engagement starts with many people around the enterprise engaging with customers, but the problem is the data is siloed. Each person, each persona around the organization potentially is using different systems, and it makes it difficult for us to understand who our customer is. And so what we see customers doing is they begin to take data out of these transactional systems, land it in a modern analytic data store like a data lake, a data warehouse. Some customers call it an enterprise data hub, and they slowly start to build this concept of a progressive profile of their customer. And then we layer on the CDP capability to accelerate that time to value. But the most important part isn't getting to the customer 360, it's actually taking the action. It's the action that we're using to attract new customers, or the action we're taking to try to retain existing customers, or the actions we take to convert more and cross-sell and upsell. In these next few steps, what we want to talk about is things that we don't want to do, problems that we've seen, I've seen many customers do, is that IT and analytics will work in a silo, and they'll work toward this customer 360 perfection. And they'll be working on this for 2 years before they even begin to try to drive business impact. So that's not what you want to do. But instead, what we want to do is we want to collaborate with the lines of business. So we have collaborative activation. And we start to build this concept of a progressive profile out in 60 days to impact. And so I'm going to give you a framework for how to pare this thing down so we're not falling into this trap of a 2-year cycle of building a perfect customer 360 before we ever begin to drive business impact. These are what I call CDP best practices, faster time to value, and getting the right scope. So first, I mentioned those 3 areas, and I'll bring these up again to either attract, convert, or retain. These are what I call strategic imperatives. Pick one strategic imperative as a place to start. Don't try to think about all 3. So we pick one, we're going to pick a role, we're going to pick a KPI to improve, and then lastly, we're going to develop a hypothesis. So I'm going to give some examples of this. But let's say, for example, we pick attract. If I want to pick a person or a role that I'm going to empower in this strategic imperative, like a marketing person. And then these marketing people are driving many KPIs. So we're going to pick one. And let's say we pick return on ad spend. And then once we pick that KPI, we want to pick a hypothesis or a customer story. So here's an example of one of those hypotheses. By knowing more about our high value customers, we can target higher quality new leads, spend less, and close more. So by targeting, by getting enough information about our high value customers, we can better define who they are. So when we spend ad dollars, we're highly targeting those high value lookalikes. And in theory, we're going to close more. I say it's a hypothesis because you're never going to know whether this hypothesis is going to drive the kind of value that you want until you experiment with it. That's why it's so important to try to get to value quicker. So the framework is strategic imperative, pick a person, what is the KPI, develop a hypothesis. The reason this is valuable is it's going to give you a much more realistic scope, and it's going to prioritize your data sets. When you pick a use case, it's going to drive you toward understanding which data sources you're going to start with. Then that's going to drive faster time to value, hopefully within 60 days. And it's also going to have a much more manageable change management impact on the org. I've got a couple of more examples in the other 2 strategic imperatives. So let's say, for example, you pick convert, and our persona is going to be a seller. And so sellers have multiple KPIs, but pick one. So we say on this example, we picked abandoned cart. When we pick the abandoned cart, let's develop our hypothesis. So in this case, our hypothesis is by alerting sellers of abandoned carts of high value customers, we can improve experiences, increase close rates, and reduce churn. There's one more. I'll close out with this third one here on retention. So if we pick a retain strategic imperative, then we're going to pick a service person Pick a KPI like repeat purchase rate. And then our hypothesis is by knowing our high-value customer needs, we can recommend offers during a call to improve CSAT and increase repeat purchase rate. So there's a few examples of ways to pare these projects down, get to an MVP, get to value faster. And one little last piece of recommendation I have is that pick the right partner. You don't want just an all analytics-driven partner. You really want somebody who understands driving business value. And I would say the people who have the most experience in this are companies who've executed on marketing activation. So a lot of that skill set comes out of the agency relationships. I talked about this evolution of CDP. I talked about those agencies being the ones that were building these things out, or the early CDPs. They have many years of experience doing it. So pick the right partner. Have somebody who understands analytics and marketing activation. And if you jumped into this video without watching any of the other three, please check out, that Microsoft's AI vision, which was number one, and how its AI is redefining customer experience. And then the second one was the evolution of CDP. Third one was a whiteboard session where I demonstrated the movement of data from trapped transactional systems into modern enterprises for data, and then moving it into these systems of activation. So check those three previous videos out, and thank you once again for listening in on Tim's Tidbits.
Tidbits Tuesdays at 2.